Those of you who were with us at our convention in Salt Lake City in 2007 had the privilege of hearing Bill Gates Sr. address the convention audience on the topic of Polio Plus. Bill is himself a Rotarian of many years, and he urged us all to think big on polio, because anything less would be a waste of our potential. Like all Rotarians, he is proud of the work we have accomplished toward polio eradication, and he is eager, as we all are, to see that work brought to a successful conclusion. Immediately following that convention, Rotary started working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The result was a $100 million challenge grant from the Gates Foundation, and we received this in November of 2007. At that time, we hoped that this grant would be the beginning of a long and productive relationship between Rotary and the Gates Foundation. Our organisation shares the very great desire to make the world a better place, especially for those less fortunate. Since 1985, Rotary has been a leader in the effort to eradicate polio. And as you have just heard from IPPC Chairman Bob, Rotary and its partners have come a long way. But there is still a great deal of work to be done. Today, I am proud to introduce to you the co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the founder and chairman of Microsoft Corporation. He joins us today to share some exciting news about our partnership and the road ahead. Please welcome Mr. Bill Gates.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thank you, John, and thank you all for such a warm welcome. I'm excited that the Gates Foundation has joined Rotarians in the fight against polio. That's why I put on my Rotary hat. And I'm honored to address the men and women who guide the work of more than 33,000 Rotary clubs around the world. I'd like to start by telling you about my wife, Melinda's Aunt Myra. We see her several times a year. She worked for Delta Airlines for a long time, taking reservations. And she lived in New Orleans until Hurricane Katrina, and then she moved to Dallas, where Melinda grew up. She loves to see our kids, and when we all get together, she sits on the floor and plays games with them. Now, Aunt Myra has polio. She's in braces, and she's had those since she was a little girl. Our children only know what polio is because of their aunt. Otherwise, the disease would just be a historical fact that they learn in school. I was born just 3 years after one of the worst polio epidemics in American history. But I didn't know anyone with polio when I grew up. That's how far we've come. And of course, that same story of success that we had in the United States has been repeated over and over in country after country. Bolivia, Vietnam, Croatia, Morocco. In the last 20 years, thanks to your hard work, polio has declined to 99%. In 1988, 350,000 people got polio. By 2008, the number was down to less than 2,000. It's an amazing statistic, and it's part of a trend in the whole field of global health. My favorite overall statistic about global health is this. In 1960, 20 million children under 5 died. And just 2 years ago, that figure was less than 10 million. So in a fairly short period of time, during my lifetime, even as more children were being born and the population was greater, the number of children who died of all causes was cut in half to less than 10 million. Now that 10 million is still too much. We have a lot to do. But that cutting it in half is one of humanity's greatest achievements. And innovations, both simple and complex, made this possible. From knit caps that keep children warm to advanced vaccines like the polio vaccines, innovation saves lives. But this advance didn't happen without the phenomenal work of groups like Rotary, which makes sure that these innovations reach the people who need them. What Rotary's done really is quite unique. Raising the money, over $800 million, but even as important, keeping polio high on the world's list of priorities. Together with WHO, UNICEF, CDC, and other partners, you've stopped millions of cases of polio. And that saved more than 1 million lives. Without Rotary, the world wouldn't be anywhere near the 99% reduction. The Gates Foundation's very first donation to polio was 10 years ago. Ted Turner gave $25 million, and he told me that since I was quite a bit richer than him, I should give twice as much. And Ted was convincing, so we followed his advice. So we're fairly new to this effort. We've been involved just for the 10 years. You've been raising money for several decades, and you've immunized billions of children. You started the fight, and you'll stay in it till the end. And that's why our foundation is excited to be your partner. With Rotary involved, we're confident that this big investment that we're making will pay big dividends. And so we'll be here with you to celebrate when the fight is over. Now, you just heard the update from 2008 from Bob Scott. You know the facts. Last year was a tough year for polio eradication. There's no denying it. We've heard more than once that this year is the final year. We get excited for this final push, and then we hear there's some complexity, whether it's security, the level of vaccination, or difficulty of the vaccine. And this is frustrating. But to be clear, eradicating a disease is hard, slow, painstaking work. We can't circle a date on the calendar and be sure we'll end it by that date. That would set us up for a possible failure. So we are making steady progress, and we have some great milestones that we'll achieve in the year ahead. This challenge is like many I faced when I worked at Microsoft. We predicted where the future would go, but we didn't know the exact date. Change doesn't happen on a schedule, but it can be more sweeping and more impactful than people imagined. Take computers. For decades, only large computers were available. They were expensive, and only big companies and governments had them. When I was a teenager, I realized that could change. We could make the computer personal. I didn't know the exact year that we'd reach milestones, but I was able to say this is an effort worth building a company and an industry around. The same lesson applies here to polio. If somebody says we can conquer it tomorrow, they'd be wrong. But if somebody says we won't, they'd be even more wrong. So we know how we will eradicate polio. We have the strategy and the tools. In fact, we don't even need to invent new things. So starting with all of you in this room, we have the will to do it. And that's why I'm here today. I want to tell you why I am certain that you and your partners will overcome the obstacles. We know exactly how many children got polio last year, 1,625. Compared to the numbers from 20 years ago, that's not very much. Some may be tempted to think, well, isn't that good enough? But there is no such thing as containing polio at its current levels. The billions of dollars, the army of health workers, the undivided attention of government officials, those resources simply aren't sustainable. The mathematics of polio are clear. We cannot maintain a level of 1,000 or 2,000 cases a year. Either we eradicate it or it returns to the days of tens or even hundreds of thousands of cases per year. There is no alternative. We don't let children die because it's fatiguing to save them. Our commitment as a foundation is to work with you and your partners until no children die from polio. Thank you. I was in India last November, and I saw what this horrible disease does. I was in a slum in East New Delhi, and I held a 9-month-old girl named Hashman in my arms. My dad and sisters were with me, and we talked to Hashman's mother in the courtyard outside her home. She was dressed in a beautiful, bright orange dress. She obviously didn't understand why people were poking her legs and looking so serious. But as she grows up, she realized she'll never be able to walk normally or kick a ball or play hide and seek because she has polio. As I held her, I thought, we must end this. There are many reasons why eradication is difficult. You have to immunize so many children. That's hard, but it's made harder because these children are moving around as their parents look for work or go to where crops are growing. Many live in hard-to-reach areas, forcing vaccinators to climb mountains, ferry across rivers in monsoon seasons, and navigate through some of the world's most difficult slums. In southern Afghanistan, children are cut off from vaccinators by war. In some communities in Nigeria, vaccinators have to overcome widespread fear that the vaccine is unsafe. Sometimes the job is difficult because of the sheer numbers. In Uttar Pradesh in India, 500,000 babies are born every month. And so unless we have a near-perfect program, every time the virus lives on. And there are scientific challenges about this disease. It's hard to determine if a child has polio. With something like smallpox, it's obvious. But to be sure with polio, it's because many conditions can resemble it, you have to collect stool samples and send them off to a lab for analysis. Additionally, there are places where it takes more doses of the vaccine to make a child immune. I didn't know that when I first got involved with polio. I just assumed the number of doses we gave in the United States would work everywhere. But in some places, including northern India, children need as many as 10 doses because they've been infected with other viruses that it reduces the effectiveness of the vaccine. To overcome these challenges takes a massive effort. But we've seen over and over again that the endemic countries are eager to make that effort. They do it because they know it will pay off. The last 20 years have proven that. Take India. The polio-fighting infrastructure in that country is staggering. Twice a year, they have national immunization days. One will start next month. More than 2 million people, from professionals to volunteers, will be involved. They will set up 800,000 vaccination booths around the country at schools, hospitals, community centers, and other places. They will make more than 200 million house visits. 200 million. And to make sure they don't miss anybody, they also go to the train stations and bus stations and ferry terminals. So in just the span of a few days, more than 170 million children in India will be vaccinated. But even that's not always enough. Hashman, the baby I met, had had some immunization, but she still got polio because she was in an area where children need more doses. That's where innovation comes in. Innovation will help us knock out these stubborn pockets. The innovations will be different in each country. It will be tailored to the needs of the people who live there. Innovation isn't just for its own sake. It's good when it helps us achieve an important goal, like eradicating polio. So in Nigeria, we need to innovate in building relationships because they're essential to getting immunization rates up. In Pakistan, we'll innovate with a system that marks the children who've already been vaccinated. One of the neat innovations is where we genetically sequence the virus, genotype it, to trace it back to see where these cases are coming from. We can actually take the stool sample from a child in Angola and determine that that virus came from India. It's amazing. And because of this technology, we draw detailed maps, and we have arrows showing the precise path of polio around the world. Because of this, we can see how it's spreading. Because of it, we have an accurate map and the information we need to target our efforts. Now, this campaign will require huge political will to keep innovating, to keep driving forward. But I've seen evidence that this political will does exist. Time and again, governments have done the right thing. When I met with people at the Indian Ministry of Health last November, I was impressed with their dedication. I'm going to Nigeria next month to meet with the political and religious leaders, including the new Minister of Health. I'm also meeting with Rotary representatives there, and I'll be in northern Nigeria where polio is the worst. There are signs of progress in some of the toughest states in Nigeria, and I'm looking forward to meeting with Nigerian officials to build even more momentum. Of course, this political will doesn't just come from the governments. Rotarians have always provided the majority of the willpower behind eradication. In India, we had a small Rotary fundraising lunch, and I had a lot of fun talking with the Rotarians about their passion for this work. Mrs. Burla, who organized the lunch, committed another $1 million to the campaign. Another attendee gave $1.5 million on top of what he'd already given, and another gave $250,000 as a first gift. That was just one lunch, less than 2 hours, and it will save lives. One thing is, so it's certain the world would not be where it is without Rotary. You have so much to offer. Your volunteers. There are more than 1 million Rotarians, and many of you have actually traveled and helped out with immunization. I've had the privilege of giving immunizations as well, and it's a wonderful thing to have that opportunity. Everybody should get that chance. The trips Rotarians take are essential, not only because your members do important work, but also because they really understand the impact they have. You are also advocates. When Rotarians talk, people listen. So you can help foster the full measure of political will we need. If you live in a donor country, you can push the government to make sure polio is a foreign aid priority. In the U.S. and throughout Europe, Rotarians have been instrumental in making sure this fight gets the funding it deserves. If you live in a country with polio, you can work with leaders to support the campaigns. Every time I've been at meetings about polio, Rotary volunteers have been in the room. Finally, you are donors. Hundreds of thousands of Rotarians around the world have contributed. The money you donate pays for the day-to-day costs. As you know, our foundation made a grant of $100 million to Rotary 1 year ago to further your efforts. We're confident you will raise the $100 million match, because right now we have to keep pushing. Right now we have the opportunity to eradicate a disease for only the second time after smallpox. And to that end, I'd like to make an announcement. Our foundation is redoubling our commitment to polio and to Rotary. We'll make Thank you. Specifically, we'll make a new $255 million grant to Rotary, bringing the total to $355 million. Thank you. Well, that's the good news. Now, as part of this, Rotary has agreed that $100 million of this will be an additional challenge grant. And so what it means is that you not only have that first $100 million to complete, you've now got another $100 million challenge on your hands. As you've heard, it's not just our foundation, Rotary. Today, we also have announcements from the governments of Germany and the United Kingdom that they're increasing their commitment by an additional $280 million. So it's these additional dollars that will be used to overcome the challenges that we face. So what Rotary's done is leveraged your commitment to polio into more than $600 million here to pay for the aggressive push that's required. We're making this grant and asking you to raise your match by the middle of 2012 because we know that eradication won't come overnight. We know that it's formidable. We don't know exactly when the last child will be affected. But we do know we have the vaccines to wipe it out. Countries do have the will to deploy the tools at their disposal. And by your continued fortitude to see this effort through to the end, we will eradicate polio. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. I think that applause speaks more eloquently than any words of mine. Thank you very much indeed. Your generosity today has strengthened our work with much more than money. This gift and your presence here today are a vote of confidence, a clearest signal possible to the world that polio eradication is possible, that it is achievable, and that it will be achieved. Every Rotarian in this room, and indeed every Rotarian throughout the world, has been working toward the goal of polio eradication for many years, even decades. We have come a long way. But all of us know very well that although we may be close to the finish, the hardest work still lies ahead. And that is why this gift at this time makes such a difference. This additional commitment shows us all that you are committed to polio eradication as we are to the end. And it reminds us that we have strong allies around the world, individuals and nations who share our belief that a polio-free world is something we must achieve together. It is a pleasure to announce today that even more voices and more nations are now speaking out clearly in their support of our work. Chairman Bob Scott has just reminded me, as I sat on the platform that he forgot to say there is an additional 10 million commitments, giving a full total of 72 million. As you have just heard Mr. Gates allude to, the government of the United Kingdom has made a commitment of 100 million British pounds. And the government of Germany a commitment of 100 million euros to polio eradication. These commitments, which are completely separate from and in addition to the Gates Foundation commitment, represents an additional $280 million toward polio eradication. We in Rotary have been saying for many years that we are going to eliminate polio. With the funding announcements made today by the Gates Foundation and the governments of Britain and Germany, and the ongoing support of Canada, Russia and the United States, there will soon become a time when we will be able to say with confidence and pride that we have rid the world of the terrible disease of polio. And we will do it. And now I'd like to invite the President, Trustee Chair-elect, and the International Polio Plus Committee to join me on stage with Mr. Gates.